I'm Brian Scordato, and this is the Idea to Startup podcast brought to you by Tacklebox. We accelerate ideas into real companies through the Tacklebox membership, and we think through startup strategy every Wednesday on the Idea to Startup podcast. You're here because you're thinking about an idea, or you're ready to launch something, or you already launched something and you're running full steam ahead. We're here to help with the counterintuitive stuff. On to it. Today, we're going to help you stop beating yourself up. Because when you beat yourself up, you make safe choices. And when you make safe choices, your startup ends up undifferentiated and boring. A bunch of smooth edges, a grilled chicken sandwich. And we don't want that because your customers don't want that. I wrote a No Whisper Ideas post on this a few Sundays ago, and it got a ton of responses. So I figured I'd expand it into a full pod, since way more people listen here than read the posts I send on Sundays. But if you did read that post, you're not off the hook. You still gotta listen. Don't you dare flip over to that charlatan Guy Raz, because I thought a lot more about this and came up with a framework that'll help you, which is more than Raz has ever done for you. I'm kidding. I actually like Guy Raz, as far as you know. Anyway, I think the post hit a nerve because nearly every founder I meet spends an enormous percentage of their waking hours beating the ever loving crap out of themselves. And worst of all, I think they think that's a good thing. That Steve Jobs probably did it too, or whatever. But it still feels awful. So when someone like me calls it out and gives you permission to stop doing it, you send an email saying the post helped. And hopefully you change. I'm taking a lighthearted tone here, but your startup really does depend on you not beating yourself up when things don't go to plan. It is a terrible use of time because it results in you thinking small. When you're stressed, your world of possibilities shrinks by a few standard deviations. You ditch anything you perceive as risky and stick to things with predictable outcomes. In most other parts of your life, paying bills, showing up to work, maintaining a relationship, this is a good strategy. In the startup world, it is not. Because the things you revert to when you're stressed are the same things everyone else will revert to when they're stressed, which means you'll be doing the same 5 things as everyone else, and you'll need your 5 things to somehow lead to a meaningfully different outcome than everyone else's 5 things, which is unlikely. You'll probably just end up in the middle of the bell curve. Startups reward spikiness and uncertainty. So, the path to the edges of the bell curve require you to understand why you beat yourself up and then to stop. The beating yourself up equation. The beating yourself up equation is an offshoot of our old friend, the happiness equation. There are 2 variables, expectations and reality. You might remember our happiness equation. It's very simple. Happiness equals reality minus expectations. If your expectations are lower than reality, you'll be happy. If not, you won't. Your happiness is entirely controlled by your expectations. The beating yourself up equation has most of the same components as the happiness equation. It too hinges on reality and expectations, but it's got a kicker, an exponent that dramatically amplifies the other 2 variables, identity. So it's reality minus expectations, all in parentheses, raised to the identity power. I know that podcasts aren't the best medium for equations with exponents, so here is what I mean. If reality is a 7 and expectations are a 10 and your identity is a 10, that is minus 3 getting raised to the 10th power, and that means you're going to be pretty upset. The identity variable depends on how strongly you've tied your identity to the outcome of your business, and how much you think your family and friends' opinion of you depends on the outcome of your business. Most founders, at least the ones that gravitate towards Tacklebox, seem to have their identities and the outcome of their startup weaved together tighter than a Twizzler pull and peel. So that exponent tends to be big, often a 10, sometimes 100. The stakes feel extraordinarily high, even during the absolute earliest days of your business. We can take a step back and realize how silly this is if we'd like. We don't put this level of expectation on just about anything else we do, whether it's a new job, a new hobby, learning a language, even a spouse. But that won't change the reality. High achievers usually tie their identity to their startup. This creates trouble the second your expectations exceed your reality. Here is an example. Let's say you get 10 customers to agree to interviews that you're hoping will push your idea forward, but 7 are a no show, and the other 3 don't give much of an indication that the problem you're focused on even matters all that much. Reality doesn't match expectations, and your identity kicker ratchets up that feeling, and you tighten up. You've set the cost of failure so damn high, and you view this result, since it's different from what you expected, as a failure, which means you'll want your next strategic move to have a more reliable outcome, something to get you back on track. Something like, say, hiring someone to build you a really pretty website, or paying a lawyer to establish your stock structure, or building a pitch deck so you can start fundraising. Predictable, reliable, visible progress. Or, more accurately, the same things that everyone else is going to do when they're smacked in the face a bit. Strategy for a startup is about being different. Beating yourself up will push you towards being the same. Today's episode exists to help you give yourself the space needed to execute a real startup strategy. One that includes a bunch of actions that will have a low likelihood of, quote, working, but if they do work, they'll deliver enormous differentiated value. This approach isn't hard because the actual tactics are hard. It's hard because of the mental toll of doing 10 things and having 8 of them fall flat. We'll dig in on that. And one quick note before we do. Our goal here isn't to just have you lower your expectations and stop being ambitious. Totally the opposite. The way to actually be ambitious is to stop beating yourself up in the first place. And we've got a framework that's going to help. And we'll get to it after a little smooth jazz. Hey, we finally got a free trial at Tacklebox. So if you've got a startup idea and a full-time job, head to gettacklebox.com and get started. We'll create some structure for you and get you going on interviews before you have to pay a dime. Think of it as instant momentum. Back to it. Winter is coming. As a kid, I was much better at baseball than basketball. Unfortunately, I couldn't handle the realities of the game. When you play baseball, you get maybe 4 at-bats each game. If you get a hit in one of those at-bats, you're doing fine. If you get a hit in 2, you're doing great. You'll very rarely get hits in 3 or all 4 at-bats, which means that more often than not, you're going to get out. 11-year-old Brian got out fewer times than just about anyone else in our town, but even one time a game was too much. Every time I made an out, I was devastated. It felt gut-wrenchingly personal, and I could not shake it off. My identity exponent, since I was young, my entire identity had been built on being an exceptional athlete, was too high. This built up until, during my sophomore year of high school, I quit, to the absolute bewilderment of my high school coach. It is easily one of my biggest regrets because I loved playing. I was just never emotionally equipped to handle a very basic part of the game. I couldn't separate an out, a totally foundational and normal part of baseball, from my identity. The parallels to startups are clear. There are foundational realities of startups that founders completely misunderstand or ignore and subsequently beat themselves up over. I never built an internal system for handling strikeouts. If I had, who knows what would have happened. We need you to build an internal system for handling things that are systemic to startups but might not be obvious. You need to handle those and not overreact to them. I weirdly like a lot of Tony Robbins' stuff. One thing he said that has stuck with me is around recessions. Every 10 to 15 years, there's a recession in the US economy. It happens like clockwork. But every time, people act like the sky is falling. He likens it to people freaking out every winter when the weather gets cold. So let's jump into 10 things that are like getting out in baseball or a stock market crash. Totally normal, but things founders constantly overreact to and beat themselves up over. The 8 Eccentricities of Startup Progress. Here are 8 things that founders beat themselves up over, but shouldn't. Number 1. 98% of everything you're doing is new, but you get mad when you can't do it fast and perfect the first time. A good example of this is drafting up a cold email to get customer interviews or to try to get your customer to do anything. It's an email, so it should only take a few minutes, right? You've done emails before. You've maybe even done cold emails. But it takes you 2.5 hours to write and another 3 days to build up the courage to send. Sometimes it takes 3 weeks to send, and you get endlessly frustrated with yourself. The challenge here is realizing that even if a task rhymes with something you've done before, the execution of it in the startup world is entirely new to you. It's like swimming in the pool at the YMCA for 10 years and then being dropped in the middle of the ocean at midnight. They're different things. You've never written a cold email for a business you're starting before. The emotional tax on doing anything new is huge, so applying your old expectations to time and effort are useless. Even if you're a marketing director at a startup, it ain't the same as getting the messaging right for your first landing page. Number two, you don't know what good looks like. You never built a startup before, so when you set expectations for what good should look like, you're just kind of guessing. You might decide that your landing page should convert 5% of customers and take you a week to build, or that you should get 25 customers in a month, or that your LinkedIn post should get 50 likes. But these numbers and expectations come from nowhere. Then, when your landing page doesn't convert, or you can only get 3 interviews, or no one likes your LinkedIn post, you beat yourself up for underperforming. But underperforming against what? You haven't earned realistic expectations yet. You've got to get some reps in first. So remove your expectations and just work hard and then reflect. Focus on learning and improving, not measuring against imaginary standards. Number three, you refuse to believe that you're a goldfish. Personal favorite of mine. I'd say that 10 founders a week tell me about how frustrated with themselves they are because they planned on working 10 hours a week but were only able to work 4. Then, when I ask them what thing they normally do that takes 10 hours a week that they removed from their life to make room for 10 hours of new work on a startup, they look at me like I'm crazy. You're a goldfish that's already grown to the size of your bowl. You have no extra time unless you actively create it. Don't beat yourself up for not magically making the day 26 hours long. And don't swap startup time for sleep either. You need that. Remove something else. Number 4, discomfort is not a negative signal. I'll do a very quick old man rant here. I see a whole lot of stuff about removing discomfort these days. If something makes you uncomfortable, don't do it. Of course, that's good advice in the places where we both know it's good advice. But it is horrible advice in the startup world. If something makes you uncomfortable, you should probably lean into it, or at least be curious about it. Do not take it as an obvious negative signal. Do not take it as part of the business you aren't meant to handle either, or as something you should outsource. Maybe eventually it'll be that, but if something makes you uncomfortable, it makes everyone else working on solving a similar problem uncomfortable too. Their instinct, like yours, will be to stop. If yours is not to stop, if it's to get excited when something is uncomfortable, you'll end up on the fringes of the bell curve. Don't mistake discomfort as a wrong step. Number 5, bad things happen fast, good things happen slow. This is one of my favorite pieces of advice, and I first heard it from my uncle, who wrote it in the book we put out at our wedding. It was his marriage advice, but it works just as well for startups. Bad things will happen fast, and good things will happen slow. The order of the two will give you false signals on what you're doing. Earlier this year, a founder in Tacklebox wrote a cold sales letter, like a physical letter in the mail, to about 50 potential customers. He had segmented them aggressively and had a pitch for a service he thought would be extremely valuable to them. Within an hour, 2 had emailed back, outraged. How had he gotten their address? Who did he think he was offering them this service? As a note, the service was in no way egregious or insulting or offensive or anything, and he got their address the same way J. Crew gets their address. But he was immediately hammered with all the bad feelings that I'm sure you're feeling now, secondhand. Bad things happen fast. But a few days later, a few other customers came out of the woodwork. They were interested. Could they hear more? A few months later, a few people from that group became customers. Good things happen slow. Don't overreact to bad before you give good a chance. Number 6, you're comparing your beginning to someone else's middle or their end. When founders look at competitors, they get discouraged and frustrated with their progress. But this is usually just you comparing your beginning to someone else's middle or end. Your 4-month-old business you've been working on nights and weekends to their 3-year-old business with 7 employees. What did you expect? Zoom in on one specific thing you can do better than that competitor for a customer they aren't serving well. Learn that process better than them. Serve that niche customer better than they could. That is how to think about competition. Number 7, you misunderstand how startups work. The 90-10 law. In the startup world, you only need to make a few great decisions. You only need a few things to work out, which means that most of the stuff you do won't work out. Let's say you do 10 big things each month. A good mix is for 6 of those things to fall completely flat, 3 to be kind of meh, and 1 to have serious impact. You then lean into that one. There's no way to predict which of the 10 are going to work, so you can't get upset at yourself for wasting your time on the ones that didn't. You also can't throw good time and money at bad. When something doesn't work, stop doing it. It is absolutely ridiculous to get mad at yourself because something you did that had a 10% chance of working didn't work. But founders do, constantly. Number 8, you misunderstand what progress looks like. Ski lifts versus staircases. On the heels of the 90-10 law, most founders don't know what progress for a startup actually looks like. For most things in life, progress looks like a ski lift. You slowly move up and to the right. You do things and you get a little bit better, and you do more things and you get a little bit better. Startups do not look like a ski lift. They look like a staircase, and the length of each step is not consistent and it's not known. So you'll work on something for a long time and get, seemingly, nowhere. Then there will be a breakthrough and you'll leap up to the next step. This is a visualization of the 90-10 law. It's easy to get discouraged during the flat parts of the staircase, but that is like getting discouraged because a leopard has stripes. It's just how they are. Editor's note, a quick Google tells me that leopards have spots. You get it. Okay, so you're beating yourself up over things that are just natural, normal parts of a startup. How do you stop? 3 practices to break the beat yourself up cycle. Now that we know what you're beating yourself up over, let's help you stop. There are 3 practices that can help, and they hit on the variables in the beat yourself up equation. Practice number 1, lower your identity exponent. The best way to stop beating yourself up is to disentangle your identity and your startup, to lower your identity exponent. My favorite prompt here is to think about your closest family and friends, the actual people who have the opinions that you care about, the ones who you think would think worse of you if your startup failed. Pick one, an actual person. Maybe it's your old college roommate, Arthur. If your business failed, what would he do? Would he actually think any less of you, or would he just support you? Now, text him. Write, "Hey Arthur, if my startup failed, what would you think?" Expand it a bit. I'd imagine you're worried about what your parents or your uncle or your favorite professor from college would think. Give him a call. Write him an email. Ask him. The pressure you're putting on yourself is fake. Most people you know are never thinking about you or your career. They're thinking about themselves. The ones that are thinking about you are the ones that actually care about you, and they'll just want you to be happy. The way they view you is already set. Your startup failing won't change a thing. It's easy to feel the weight of outside expectations, but it's helpful to really dig in on those to understand that it's mostly just a mirage. The other way to lower that exponent is to ask yourself those questions. If this startup, a thing with like a 30% chance of working, doesn't work, then what? Do you just pack up your bags and call it a life? Or do you try the next thing and then the next after that? We really want this to work, but if it doesn't, you're probably going to be fine, and no one that matters will think any less of you. Now, try like hell in creative ways to make it work. Practice number 2, calibrate your expectations. When you notice you're starting to kick your own butt a bit, run through this simple diagnostic. Ask yourself, which of the 8 eccentricities Brian talked about is this? If it's number 1, everything is new, stop holding yourself to old standards. If it's number 2, you don't know what good looks like, write down where your expectations came from. If you can't point to direct, relevant experience you've got, let go of those expectations. If it's number 3, the goldfish, instead of beating yourself up for being lazy, write down exactly what you stopped doing that made room for your startup. If it's number 4, discomfort, ask, am I avoiding this because it's uncomfortable or because it's actually wrong? If it's number 5, bad things happen fast, good things happen slow, set a timer for a week before making decisions on a bad result or bad feedback. If it's number 6, comparing yourself to others, write down the resources and time the competitor you're upset about has that you don't. Then write out where you still have an advantage. If it's number 7 or number 8, the 90-10 law or staircase progress, remind yourself that 9 out of 10 things not working is the expected outcome, not failure. And practice number 3, the expectation audit and daily affirmations. On Sundays, I'd recommend you do 2 things. First, ask yourself a simple question. What did I expect to happen this week versus what actually happened? This is where you'll dig in on what you're actually beating yourself up over, because the expectations versus reality question will always uncover it. You'll write about what you wished you'd had time for or where you fell short. Zoom in on these and look for patterns. See if you can dispel any with the 8 that we just talked about. The second thing to do on Sunday is an affirmation. Pick any of the following or make up your own, anything that might be helpful. Here they are. Most of what I'm doing today is new. Slow and imperfect is normal. I don't know what good looks like yet, and that's fine. I have exactly 24 hours a day, just like everyone else. Discomfort means I'm doing something worthwhile. Bad news comes fast, good news comes slow. I'm comparing my beginning to someone else's middle. 9 out of 10 things won't work, and that's the game. Progress looks like a staircase, not a ski lift. I don't think 11-year-old Brian ever really thought about why he got so upset when he made an out. But if I'd realized that I'd tied my entire identity to each of these at-bats, if I was maybe able to decouple that identity a bit, maybe I would have kept playing because I'd realized how silly all the pressure was. Or maybe I wasn't all that good in the first place and I'm just misremembering. Who knows? The main thing is to stop freaking beating yourself up. Because startups only work when you're different. You only become different by doing things other people don't, can't, or won't. Those things are new and unproven and unlikely to work right out of the box. They're going to take time. And if you beat yourself up, you'll never get to them. And now I kind of feel bad about the Guy Raz jokes. Go listen to how I built this. He seems like a good guy. We all love that show. It's great. Have a great week. This was the Idea to Startup podcast brought to you by Tacklebox. If you've got a startup idea and a full-time job, head to gettacklebox.com where we can help you build it.